Hello everyone, my name's Robin Ewing and I'm co-director of the Create Centre with Professor Michael Anderson. It's our pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon and thank you all for coming. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of our land, the First Nations Australians. We'd like to pay our respects. We'd like to thank them for their fine care and respect for our beautiful country. The University of Sydney is on Gadigal land. You might like to acknowledge the land on which you're zooming in from in the chat line. I'm zooming in from Darug country. We also want to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And we'd like to acknowledge that First Nations people's land was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to Professor Michael Anderson.
Thanks, Robin, and welcome everyone. So great to see you all joining us today. This is a really exciting time for Create because we're really engaging with one of the kind of issues that is on everyone's mind. We often do this because, of course, Create's remit is really to think about how the arts can be applied directly to the issues in education, to health and well-being, and that's really why we've been put together as a centre. If that's of interest to you, please join Create. It's free. We'd love to have more members. We'll put in the chat box the link to join Create. The worst thing that can happen to you is you'll get a few emails and you'll find out what's going on in the world of creativity. The newsletters actually feature some of our work, but work from lots of other places as well. The other thing to draw your attention to is we've had several of these on-cons and these webinars, and we've got a YouTube channel that's kind of curated a lot of them. So if you have a look there, you're bound to see something that will be of interest. But please join Create, have a look at the YouTube channel, and kind of throw us some ideas about what you'd like to see more of in the Create space. So it's really my pleasure to introduce Brad Haseman and Amanda Morris, who have been colleagues for longer than we'd all care to admit, probably. Amanda, I've known Amanda since she worked at NIDA, and she came out with what I think is one of the pioneering parts of technology and education, which was the stage struck CD-ROM at the time, if you can believe it. Since then, she's gone on to be Dean of Performing Arts at La Salle and Executive Director of Conservatoire at NIDA. She's one of those people who gets things done. She's done amazing things over her career, and it's really my pleasure to welcome her today. And Brad has had a long and storied career as one of the leaders in arts education, and now has found another job as an Executive Vice President of Kadenze, which he's been doing since 2019. You may know him from QUT and lots of conferences that he's spoken at, and really being a leader in the ideas world about how the world of performing arts and creative arts intersects with technology. And it's a real pleasure to have Brad here today. So I'm going to hand over to Brad and Amanda, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about some ways that we might be able to unmute creativity.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that, and thank you for inviting us to give this webinar.
Absolutely, it's terrific to be here, and terrific to see so many familiar names. Even though some of you have muted your faces, it's great to see so many familiar names and familiar presences in this space. So we might just launch straight in, Amanda, if we could do the
So
sharing screen.
we are going to,
Is that-
we have a little PowerPoint organized, so I'm going to do the sharing of screen work.
So,
And
yes, so.
I'll just get this going.
Right, my dear.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we just pop it onto full screen, or is it easier
There
to
we
keep
go.
it? Ah, there we are. That's right. Well, look, greetings, everyone. We've got this. The next slide will just sketch this, what we thought of the angle for today, which is 4 parts. Part 1, which I'll chat through, which is some observations about what's muting creativity online. So people with an education agenda who want to go online, what are the problems? What's holding us back? The second part is the whole thing of introducing you to Kadenze's approach to online learning design. We call it technology-enabled creative learning, TECL. And so we believe it's a significant framework for bringing creativity for judgment and interpretation back into the online space. And then what we've got are some learning pathways and some student creative work from Kadenze students and courses. So hopefully that will be that will give some real substance to what we're talking about. We'd like to open it up as a Q&A about, from your experience, do you have a project right now that you're trying to work on, and are you stymied or unsure about how to go forward? We'd love to hear about that. And also the digital tools and online systems that you found work really well to open up creative energies. And finally, just a very short nod to future directions and a wrap up for where we're going.
And Brad, Brad, before we move on, we might just ask people, as we go through this presentation, if there are questions or thoughts that you have along the way, if you could note those in the chat, because Michael will pick up on some of those questions for the Q&A at the end.
Yeah, that'll structure that. So that'll be terrific. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Okay, so a quick walk through this, but it's actually all of these 5 forces which are inhibiting creative educators, I think, can be characterized this way. And our experience in Kadenze, which began in 2015 with online courses, and online courses in the creative arts and design and creative technology. So Kadenze isn't interested in all of the disciplines and all of the various delivery and engagement modes. We are the platform that's committed only to the creative arts and design and creative technology for creative education. So the first point really is, right now, and this is COVID driven, it's been COVID driven, right now the dilemma is, how do we maximize quality in an educational marketplace full of proliferation and often driven by clumsy emergency content? Remember the 2 weeks last March when everyone had to go online and there was a desperate grab to do that? So that's what I mean by emergency content. That was often just clumsy, and some people, many have gone back to refine and reflect on that. But there's a lot of really clunky teaching out there online because of this emergency. And secondly, what I'm characterizing as vernacular wisdom. And what I mean by vernacular wisdom is the plethora of YouTube videos on how you do this, how you do that. Any, to quote Paul Keating, any parrot in a parrot shop can actually put a course up online. And now that's not a bad thing. That's a full democratizing impulse. But we really need to be careful about the quality of a lot of that work. And a lot of it, it's kind of vernacular wisdom that may actually be just vernacular pap as well. The second thing, which also links from the COVID-driven moment, is that we've now suddenly got a complexity around delivery modes. So we knew when we went into MOOC world, we knew we were dealing with asynchronous. So it would all be done, learner's own time, offline, coming back online, and so on. So it was all asynchronous. What we have now is we certainly have that still throbbing and that heartbeat there, but we also have what we're calling synchronous live, which is the classroom again. So, you know, there's 25 of us and we're in the classroom, and that's fine, that's familiar in a sense, but the days where you would never go and use asynchronous ever again, I don't think there are many people saying we'll go back to that normal. Asynchronous and the explosion of engagement in online learning, for good and bad, was phenomenal in 2020, and it's, who'd have thought, the momentum's continuing. There's also, as well, synchronous online. So this is all the Zoom stuff, the Google, the Google Meet and the like. And what we're finding, certainly in the place that I was once had a lot to do with, there are people working synchronous live in the classroom, but they are also Zooming with 15 people or 50 people on Zoom as well. So this adds another layer of complexity to the delivery mode. And then, of course, what's emerging now, and the name is distinctly from the US, as you can tell, but this is the blended mix of synchronous, synchronous live, asynchronous. What are we being asked to do? Although we know we need to do more with less and not complain. But what we're left with is this idea that courses need to be hybridized. Blended was a word we used to use, and COVID-driven, hybridized and flexible. So that's given rise to the term high flex. So what is it to create a high flex course where you're dealing with all four of these contexts for delivery? Now, the third point to connect with in relation to what's muting our creativity, and this is something I've had the chance to really dig into since I retired in 2016. And what is evident is that the overwhelming orthodoxy among learning design for online learning design, it is unfriendly and indeed disrespectful of the frameworks that we need for creativity and in the creative arts. So the pervasive online education learning design, and often the institutional response, oh, we'll grab that. Yes, it'll all be run through Blackboard, and here's the learning design everyone can follow. And that's what I mean by unfriendly and disrespectful. And this is a very complex matter, of course. We spend a seminar on this, but just 2 slides to try to elaborate a little on what I'm saying. So the first slide, if we could just go to the next one, and I will actually go slowly through this because it's significant. So taking that notion of the unfriendly and disrespectful stuff, from the very beginning, online learning design is principally focused on developing analytical and linear cognitive capabilities. As we are told repeatedly, these capabilities are essential for learners to hold down a successful job and build a powerful economy. Overwhelmingly, learning design has engendered the cognitive operations of mind most commonly found in mathematics, chemistry, language, engineering, and business education. Now, this approach, as it's emerged, as it's a hegemonic force over the landscape in just about every country, it's underpinned by a cognitive load theory, which holds that for online instruction to be effective, care must be taken not to overload the mind's capacity for processing information. Consequently, designers become concerned with, and these are terms from cognitive load, extraneous load, working memory, redundancy, and concerns about temporal and spatial split attention, all to ensure that students never become cognitively overloaded. There would be a view in that I should not have read this and had the image up for you as well, because that's cognitively overloaded you. So for those people who are asleep or lost now, bumping into the furniture, wondering where they are, that's the danger. That's what I've done to you by not respecting cognitive load. I'm big flip, of course. Next slide. So what does all this mean, though? So if we take an Artsled learning framework, we encourage, of course, learners to stay with all their senses, not just cognition. It's not simply operations of mind and the brokering of concepts. And it was really important to just say this isn't just something that's been thought up. This has a long tradition in educational and aesthetic philosophy. And it's a 200-line of thought from Kant. I mean, you can go back to Plato, particularly if you're Muso, they go back there. But you can actually go back to Kant and Schopenhauer, then Ernst Cassirer and Suzanne Langer in the early 20th century, and most recently, Maxine Green, Elliot Eisner, Ken Robinson, Howard Gardner, and others. But these are the, including Robin and Michael on this call. So, there have been a number of people who've worked in this space. And we acknowledge, for instance, that many creative arts and design experiences are deliberately designed to stretch the limits of cognition. So not all cognitive overload is necessarily negative. We know when we're struggling to make sense of Bengara's last dance piece, that's the point. And making us struggle cognitively and put our conceptual framework understood through our senses as sentient beings, that this is the point of the work. So in these cases, overload's not the result of a loss of meaning or intelligibility. Indeed, it can be understood as cognition in the making, where the very fabric of cognitive life is renewed as it struggles to make sense of experience. And arts educators see productive possibilities for learning in the overload, not simply as events which inhibit and confuse. And that's not to say cognitive load theory or these other learning design models are incorrect. Most are certainly necessary, but alone, they are not sufficient. Creative education online requires strategies to amplify the experiential and stir the imagination, to engage in challenges of interpretation and judgment where understanding is not simply the mastery of technical skills and factual accuracy. Creative education generally requires a learning design applicable to all disciplines, but spawned from educators, by educators, from music, dance, drama, film, media, the visual arts, design, and the creative applications of technology and computing power. So that's just two slides that get to the essence of the argument that obviously underpins much educational philosophy and aesthetic thought, but also what we embrace in Kadenze. So just moving on from this one then, the fourth dynamic or force is that many learning management systems can't accommodate the requirements we need to be creative online. I don't know, you may have found you can work miracles with Blackboard. If you can, tell us all, because you can make a lot of money. Most people who work in our field literally tear their hair out. So how do we build a learning management system so that we can go online, but in our own terms, on our own terms, not actually, because these learning management systems have typically been built for the delivery of, as I said earlier, linear cognitive learning. And the fourth and final point to make about the difficulty is that, and this is a curious one, it's related directly to us. You know, there are very different disciplinary traditions across the creative arts and design. So these are different traditions already, not embodiment, for instance, taking one idea. Embodiment is not the same for all of the arts or all of the lessons that we design. So, and of course, the disciplinary traditions are inflected by our own personal preferences and projects. So and how we do that online, how we engage, it's a really critical area of future research through practice-led approaches, I might add. So, you know, I mean, still the term, you know, that's pretty official still in formal dance companies is, I'm employed to choreograph on the company. Now that says something about an approach to embodiment that certainly the progressivism where every child can draw a painting and it goes on the fridge is there's a different heartbeat to that. So they're the five. I want to just conclude by saying this is an extraordinary space for experimentation right now. And that's one reason I joined Kadenze. because it seemed to me that the online opportunity, while many in the arts were very cautious about it and actually could only see it in deficit and as an impoverished form of engagement, it seemed to me that to miss the opportunity to leave this space to the other disciplines was a serious error of thinking, and we needed to be in here to change this. And the last thing is, there's a strong social justice agenda why we've got to get good at this, in my view. And it's this, the Halcyon report talking about education in 2030 says, by 2030, Asia brings online over 200 more post-secondary graduates. 200 million more. So this is an equity question for the world. Well, do we think we can train that extra can we bring the benefits of arts education and learning to 200 million people by running workshops 25 at a time? That's not to say we shouldn't do that, but we face serious questions about how we make our contribution to humanity and to human knowledge, serious questions about how we make it scalable, affordable, and of high quality. And it should be our challenge, every bit as it is, how do I work with the 25 students I have in my MIME workshop next week? Okay, that wraps up my introduction and why we need to do this work.
Thanks, Brad. And I have the daunting task to follow Brad and look at some of the nitty gritty. What can we do, and how can we design not only for creativity and creative education online, but also for diversity, which Brad touched on. You know, learning is not a one-size-fits-all process. Different learners need to learn in different ways. Different disciplines have a range of, you know, different requirements, different histories of how they've been taught, and pedagogical approaches. Different teachers bring very different teaching styles to the work. How can we accommodate that diversity online? And certainly we believe that learning is made more powerful through interactivity and engagement. So in developing a learning design framework for the online environment, to be able to support creative arts and design, we looked wherever possible to amplify opportunities for diversity, flexibility, interactivity, and obviously creative collaboration. At Kadenze, we developed the learning design model called, as Brad's mentioned, Technology-Enabled Creative Learning. In short, TECL. It sounds a bit like tickle, but it draws on our extensive experience as practitioners in arts and design in the studio, in face-to-face teaching, as well as online settings. And I think Brad and I, just prior to starting this webinar, we reflected that actually probably there aren't that many people who have the extensive experience not only in teaching face-to-face, studio-based creative practice, but also online. So we're drawing on that experience. So let me introduce you to TECL. Here we have a bit of an overview using a diagram. As you can see, right at the center, at the heart of the framework is the need to clarify and identify your goals in designing a course. And then, because once you've clarified it, that you can maintain at the heart of your teaching student-centered focus and really making sure that you're providing a course that addresses your students' aspirations. So at the center is identifying the learning goals. And then the three sides of the triangle, as you see, give the three dimensions, the structural framework, if you like, for this model. which can be applied in quiet planning mode, but also in emergency mode when you really need a life buoy and you just, your schedule has changed for next week and you have to refresh what you're delivering and how you're delivering it. Having a model that is flexible and supportive, I think it is important in either of those circumstances. So the three dimensions are the principles, the overarching principles, a set of specific instructional activities, and some animating questions to guide effective online pedagogy. And it's important to keep all three of those dimensions in mind. They're not proposed as a sequential. It's not a linear process. They all are at play at the same time. And this framework can be applied, as Brad was saying, across different modes of delivery, whether online, asynchronous, live synchronous, or live in person, or as many of us are doing at the moment, across a hybrid mix of all three of these modes. So I'll just jump into dimension one. Here you can see there are these well-established principles of arts and design education, these 8 principles that inform the overall logic of the framework. We're focused on supporting creative education, and so we've put at the top, create, including getting students to make things early in a course and often, telling stories, simulation, whether it's make-believe, or looking to realistic simulation where students can see the application in real life circumstances. Asking students to observe repeatedly over time and for depth. Helping students to find meaning and letting their curiosity lead rather than providing answers. And helping them to synthesize their learning as they go so that meaning comes together. Reflecting to gain deeper and fresh perspectives, and how to help students master their skills, how to practice skills online through creative exercises and presentations. So that's the dimension one, the overarching principles. Now we come to dimension two, which is a set of instructional activities for you to consider. As you can see, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a list. It's a list that we think covers the core range of types of learning activities that you might set for within a course. The art of learning design lies in the way these instructional activities are positioned and a learning pathway is sequenced. And we'll come to that a bit further on, the learning pathways that are drawn from this list. In a sense, I see this list as almost like the shopping list of the core household ingredients that you can then week by week mix and match and create tasty recipes for your students. And I would encourage everyone to add to the list. I mean, every teacher will have their own unique activities that that are their go-to activities. But I think we also need to remain alert and open to the full range of activities that can support creative education online so that our teaching remains fresh and there are moments of surprise for students. Moving on to dimension 3, examples of animating questions. These are questions that teachers ask themselves all the time. But they help us improve the experience of the online learner. What we've found at Kadenze when we're working with instructors or authors of new courses is it framing these as questions is really helpful for course designers, so that they are able to have those questions present at all times. Brad's going to pick up on the sequencing in a moment, but I just thought I might talk briefly about feedback. We all understand that feedback for students is really critical, and a combination of asking students to practice and reflect on what they've already learned, but also move on to new and fresh content is critical. And finding moments for them to reflect, to share with other students, including peer assessment online, instructor feedback as well. And I'll touch on community and collaboration. I think we can draw on tools, whether they're as simple as instant messaging or the online discussion forums, to really build communities of learners for our teaching online. And finally, I just want to touch on presence. This final, I think many of us find it a struggle as to how we present our presence or maintain our presence online. But we do need to remember that, in fact, the teacher is a potent influence for students. And so I'd love to just share this link of one example of teachers from MICA on the Kadenze platform who decided to co-teach a course on graphic design. And they decided to share with their students their very different approaches in their introduction. I'll just share this with you.
So I think we should just start from here.
Format and make it.
Used Schmidt. Us. Sad.
We want to make sure you
Yes,
have
you
enough
can.
like photos to.
We are
Yeah.
not,
Okay.
no, we're
We have to
not,
start.
we are not starting
We
this
have to start
class
at the
with
beginning.
cave painting. We're starting with typography. Typography is printing, it's mechanical, it's industrial. It's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It's the first mass production, and that's where graphic design starts.
It's not all about technology. We've got to go back to cave painting. We've got to go back to the first pictorial signs that informed the alphabet.
But those are made by
It's a
hand with like mud and fingerprints
Mud is
and
cool.
stick.
I'll stop that there, but I just thought it was lovely to, really refreshing to see how the way those two teachers decided to share with their students right up front their very different views and different approaches to the same topic and how they were going to teach. And at Kadenze, we really believe that different teaching styles and different approaches to teaching the topic provide students with richer learning opportunities. I'm going to pass on to Brad now, who is going to look at building a learning pathway.
I'll move through this really quickly because you've been listening for a while and we want to get to some of the concrete examples. But so you've already seen that slide, which has a list of instructional activities. And it's interesting to watch the way people take live classroom exercises and turn them into effective online teaching strategies. But so, okay, so there's a list that we find crops up quite commonly in what people use when they're starting to design a course. So, and what we have in the TECL document, the TECL is an ebook and it contains a lot of detail about this framework that we're giving you. So if we just go to the next slide, for instance, this is, and I'm not sure if you probably can't see it close up enough to read, but these are the way we describe the instructional activities that we want to, and that we can enable on our platform. So there's obviously ones like video conferencing, and of course Zoom and Google Meet have become just so important now, but that's only one approach. I often, you talk to authors who say, oh no, I do it all on Zoom. And you go, well, you can do stuff on Zoom, but there's so much else you can do if you've got a good platform to work on. So for instance, posting stuff to forums is important. Posting stuff to galleries, student work and other teacher illustrations to galleries. So where you can upload video, sound files, rich images, and so on, so that it's, you're not left trying to wave a picture in front of students on a Zoom. And also one of the things, this actually came from a group of people we worked with at QUT about building digital case studies. So how you build those, but they're case studies with artifacts and the like that are all online and provide this wonderful simulatory activity that require people to hold difficult conversations, film them, put them up for critique in the forum, or you can post the whole video into the gallery. So digital case studies, they take work, but they're really great. Next one, I'm just doing 2 of these, so I'm not trying to take you through that whole list of instructional activities, but there's details, videos found, what videos are on YouTube, what of that vernacular wisdom can you use that's freely available and that you can use to bring the world into your classroom. And 90% of the stored information of the world is now in digital form. So, well, how do we use that? And what opportunity does that open for us as teachers? Posting on social media, and then videos bespoke, shooting your own videos. And that's been a very popular thing. And there's a lot to be said about that, including that people are becoming much more comfortable looking at videos that aren't feature film quality. So, a good camera, a good microphone, a good iPhone, you can shoot stuff and edit it easily of perfectly acceptable quality. Now, this next slide is the slide that we have found our authors love. Because what we've done here, and it's very simple, we've just listed the common recurring instructional activities in the learning pathway. And what we've done is we've repeated that, and we've said, okay, here you are. Now, how do we start? How do we build a learning pathway for this course? And in this illustration, we're going to make a bespoke video. So we'll do that. From there, I'm going to give them a creative activity. You would be amazed at the number of lessons that involve creative engagement that never let the learner get to be creative. They're spending their whole time reading stuff and looking at other people's work. How do you construct the creative experience early? So we might go from that. That might lead to a research task then, that then spins into a reflection activity, and so on and so on. And quite seriously, most people we showed this to go, well, some go, yeah, this is obvious, which it is, but others go, oh my God, this really is helpful to help me curate a path through it. And I will just say that when I was in China just before COVID, and there was I was watching at the Carnegie Mellon, and a big Chinese education company had maths for kids in for little 5-year-olds. And seriously, what they did is that they had, the little ones had a 90-second video on a skill which they watched. They then did the quiz down the bottom. They did the quiz. If they got the quiz, they went on to the next video. If they got that, they did another quiz. So the whole learning pathway was just this impoverished, disastrous theatre approach. Now, I know there's a lot of move to change that, but what we are trying to do with this is to provide that richness of opportunity rather than, and if you failed the quiz, you went back and watched the video again. So it's a pretty bleak understanding of how, like, it doesn't engage with motivation, except I got 9 out of 10. It's heartbreaking, really. And they'll probably be good engineers, but I'm not sure what else will come from that. Okay, and then the next slide really takes us to, I just wanted to show on our platform, one of the things I did is I worked with people to build a teaching artistry course on teaching artists. And I just wanted to show you that on our platform, this actually is actually a lot of video, all of the playlist, the learning pathway turns into a media queue so that you can follow the learning pathway very smoothly and structurally, knowing, of course, that some people will duck all around the place and they'll watch this one before they watch that one. But putting that to one side, through the media queue, you can follow, and you'll see these are videos. So there are 4 videos. There's an exercise, which is another instructional activity, and then locating a forum activity, which is another and different forum activity. The reason I'm just sharing this with you is the examples you want to share use this kind of framework. So I think we'll just move quickly to an example. And I think the first one we're looking at is in music.
And this one is a course called Loop, and it teaches students how to use repetition and variation in music, presented by University College Cork. And as you can see, the media queue of video lessons is on the right-hand side. It has, as part of that, the teacher asks the students to listen to particular recordings. So there's suggested listening. Then there's composition techniques and a particular case study, Brian Eno, and music for airports. And then what the students are asked to do is their own assignment, a creative piece of work where they have to apply using the loops to create a piece called Losing Your Sense of Time. And I am just going to have to find my pointer because I've lost it. So I can be able to, there we go. Click on this and be able to show you an example of a student's piece of work, their assignment in Kadenze, so they can upload to a gallery, to the course gallery, the music that they've created. I will play that. Here we go. I'll jump in here. And so this is a piece based on loops. Oh, let me see if I can get it happening. Oh, damn.
It's probably just buffering or something. It was.
Yeah. What is nice is not only can you listen to the music, but the student, part of the assignment, the student has been asked to reflect on doing the work. So I'll show you the reflection, which is in text beside it. So he says, in order to create a space where the listener can lose their sense of time, I composed a few loops. First, I created a short chordal melody that is cut short of a full 2-bar loop, giving it a sort of polyrhythmic feel. So, and so on. I'll go back to it and see if it will come up again. Maybe I shouldn't have. Oh,
I wouldn't.
Sorry.
It's probably not worth
I will,
waiting for the NBN
we'll move on to the
network
next
catch
one.
up. Yeah.
Move on to the next one, which is a fashion course. Brad, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Obviously I should talk about fashion, shouldn't I? It's just so obviously. This is Otis College of the US. I mean, Kadenze, we've got over 30 partners, and they're all leading institutions globally who are building these courses. We're also working with a whole bunch of other authors on a whole range of other projects. But so this is a media queue. So the media queue is here, and 7 things. This is their learning pathway, and this is all about different historical periods, fashion designers, and the assignment is really to do with an example of contemporary designer who is using historical inspiration. So this is kind of very straightforward in the sense that this one is, did you just do that? Yes. So there's the work the student did. And if we actually click on the comments there, you'll see there are, if you just go back one, yeah, and you'll see that in the first one, which is the 3 work, if you just look, we'll click on the comments. So what we're getting there is, you know, like red saying the nipped waists, and I know about this stuff, and full layered skirts make this collection are definitely inspired by Dior's new look. And you know, Alex goes great find, and black and white photo and the monochromatic colors from Sathya. So you get the chance, and the requirement was you had to respond to each student's work, and so there are the 3 responses from students there. Okay. Look, we might just click to the next one, and I hate doing this, but I think maybe we can quickly. This is a cinematic story. This guy was one of the founders of Pixar, and he's now teaching at the California College of the Arts. And he's teaching cinematic storytelling. It's a great course. I think we've had over 10,000 enrollments in it. But just to illustrate how what they had to do is they had to select a movie and upload an instance of the effects the attributes that gave rise to the movie. So this one is, and here we are, there are 7 of those. So this student, Aria Zhao, this is the one online. Yeah. We could click the next one. This is
color, an example of color.
Tones up now that I can see. Yep.
Contrast, an example of contrast from the film. An example of circles and shape, yeah, and so on. And they had to find 7 examples of these: space, movement, and rhythm.
So this was, and you know, you can imagine there's a level of efficiency in this too by having students share this work, critique and comment. And the last one, I'm wondering if we got time to show this one. I don't mean to tease you by not showing it, but we
could show a little the beginning part.
Maybe, yeah. So as you see, there's the learning pathway there. It's presented as a media cue. Great school in New York, School of Visual Arts. When I said, well, where are they from? What's the They are the School of Visual Arts. So anyway, yeah, maybe just share. So they had to make an advertisement, a mock advertisement. And this is about using a camera effectively.
Yeah.
And this person, Ramez, he'd already made a film. So he turned the task into building a trailer for his advertisement, a trailer as an advertisement for his film. I just by way of wrapping this up, and then we're going to throw it open to questions now, but just by way to wrap it up is that what you're seeing this work in our gallery, and the Kadenze gallery allows that uploading of all kinds. We have a dance mob in New York, Limbs. They're teaching exclusively courses using dance and uploading video. It won't come as a surprise. A lot of drama and dance are reluctant and haven't worked out how to make this work effectively. A lot of it leans towards this sort of secondary mode of representation. But just to say that as we go through, as we do this work, it's a time for experimentation. We need people to be wrestling with these parameters and actually insisting that the digital, so our gallery, for instance, that's one place for critique and sharing. They then students then upload that into a portfolio of their creative work, which they can link with Facebook and all social media, and it's present for them for future career development. So having these functionalities to enable us to be creative online and to lead creativity online is extremely important, and we should be agitating for the platforms that you're forced to use that don't give you that flexibility. Okay, that's it from what I wanted to say. So I think if I'm happy to open this to questions now and anything at all that's relevant to what we've talked about.
Great, Brad. Such a treasure trove of things to talk about. One of the questions that I've got, and I'll throw to Sean to unmute and maybe ask his question about live performance in a second, is the kind of flows that you showed kind of pedagogically, are they flows that wouldn't exist in a live classroom potentially anyway? I mean, could they be applied to a face-to-face context that had sufficient technology?
Amanda, do you want to pick that up? Or
I would have thought that they could, Michael. I guess in some instances, you would be adding to the list of instructional activities to choose from, really, because we've got forums there, or post to gallery, post to, dealing with the online environment. But if we added activities that you would do in a studio space or face-to-face with students, then yes, absolutely. And as we have to deal more and more across modes of delivery, where, you're in a physical space with half your students, but the other half need to be, for whatever reasons, coming in remotely, and you're accessing asynchronous online material and activities at the same as well, you would want to be mapping out how you're negotiating across all of those terrains. Yeah.
So in a sense, it's the turning up and turning down of the technology in the live, depending on the different kind of context. Yeah, sorry, Brad.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things, for those of you who are schooled have come from arts education, you're teaching one of the arts, I hope nothing we have shared with you from TECL is surprising. Seriously, it's not meant to be. It's an attempt to gather together what is most important to us and contemplate how we mobilize this online. And we do it really well, not in a random, clumsy way. So like the 8 animating questions, if you are a teacher and you're not thinking about those 8 things when you plan your classroom for the day, then you shouldn't be being paid as a teacher, in my view. That's just me being silly. But do you know what I'm saying? There's nothing new in those 8 questions. They are actually what you are trained to know, and you spend years getting really good at them and applying them. So what we were doing in the principles of TECL, those 8, of course, our DNA is we start by creating. But believe me, that's not the way the online world thinks. So it's about trying to reprioritize to create new priorities, and to give a planning framework that deals with the stability of the online world, where you need to list things in kind of linear ways to be introduced.
Right. Sean, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah.
Sure, there we go. Hi, how you doing? Hi, Amanda. Hi, Brad. How you doing? Good to see you. So as Bradley knows, I work in a tertiary institution, the Australian Performing Arts Conservatory, with bachelor degrees for acting, song and dance, and screen production. So my question is the live performance. Obviously, the film is great, and during lockdown we did a couple of screen units while we were on Zoom, and they worked really well because we were on a screen. So we could make that work. We could also get people to move in their own homes and move around, but to actually recreate the live performance, part of our learning is I can't see a way how we can translate that into online learning. I know that the UTAS has a new theatre being built down there, which I've forgotten the name of it, something hegemonic or something like that, that has got motion capture pictures, and we can sort of appear in classrooms around the world, which would be great. But yeah, so live performance online.
Yeah, and it'd be wonderful to see where technology takes us with virtual reality, augmented reality, all of that. But as you say, it's an extension of the live. It doesn't necessarily replace the live. And I think what's quite difficult for online is the group work that we are so used to doing.
Yes.
Live. I think often we've found over the past year or so through the pandemic, we've found ways for individual performance work to continue, particularly vocal work, translate online, vocal exercises, and individual movement work you can do on your own if you have a house that has some space, has a room with space. But it's the group work. Brad, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is something people say constantly, and for a good reason. I can't see how I could do that online. And I think one of the things to do is to be really self-critical about, well, what could I do, and what can I do that I may even be able to do better? Because learning to be an actor isn't always being on your feet, getting hot and sweaty, learning lines and saying lines. It's looking at other people's work. It's developing frameworks of critique. It's gaining masteries of genre and style. And it's understanding text analysis. Now, these things can all be managed online. Now, the truth is, being managed online by, I don't know, Al Pacino, like no one can do that online, right? Presumably he's so good at text analysis, he's the best, one of the best in the world. But there are stuff we can do, there is stuff we can do that advances understanding. And I think one of the critical things is what can you do, is for us, each of us in our experimentation to say, what can I do online that actually could be better? So one thing, for instance, is getting students to reflect and comment. So if you take even a film performance and you go, okay, what are we seeing here? And that has to be subject to a forum, and everyone has to comment, and you have to write 60 words, not that, oh, that was cool, I love James Spader, but, seriously engage where the silent students have to speak. I mean, it's one of the things that's come across pretty clearly is that well-structured reflection and sharing and reflecting on sharing can be done more comprehensively and more interestingly online than in a live setting where 5 people say everything and 5 people say a bit and 5 say nothing. So that's all. I think it's about that question of what can you do online as well and better even, and what can't you do? And we shouldn't try to do what we can't do, I don't think.
Can I just add one more question? Do you think it's possible in the future? Because what I'm thinking about theatre in the future, to me, will be different in a way that there'll still be live audiences at the theatre, but then, you know, there'll be 200 people in the audience, but there'll also be 2 million people watching on their virtual headsets, and they'll be able to walk up on stage and walk around the actors and stuff like that. And so that's something that in the future will be great, because you can do that online really easily.
Bring on the holodeck from Star Wars, absolutely. From Star Trek. Sorry, yeah.
I agree, and I think where we are able to control, and at the moment we can't control necessarily when we are together in person with our students and when we are not, but in the ideal scenario where we are able to control, that we use the time really wisely for in-person teaching for the things that we can't do so well online. And yeah, the live performance as a group, that kind of work, you would want to save the in-person teaching time for.
That's great. Katie, I'm mindful that your question may have been answered, but is there a part of that hasn't quite answered your question that you want to focus on?
No, it's just such a challenging space that we're in. That's all. Not wanting to lose that. It's the group thing for me. Not wanting to lose that working physicality together. And I've been racking my brains about how to do it. And I keep hoping there's a miracle out there somewhere that'll give me the answer. But
Katie,
what strategies have you been? What kind of sessions are you talking about, and how have you got around it at the moment?
Well, I haven't yet because I haven't had to. We managed to teach in person. I'm on the Gold Coast, so we managed to teach in person at the beginning of the year. But I know that that I just need to prepare for the eventuality. And for so many of our online students who just miss out, and they'll be teachers one day.
Yes.
We need to be together. It's
well,
people.
And again, the thing I would just say is, and I am very optimistic about what COVID has done and that emergency teaching move has done for online learning, because it's released a whole bunch of us to turn our minds to this. And if we don't do it, no one else will. Seriously, there'll be the odd great science teacher. There's a lovely video about a kindy teacher in Newcastle doing the rounds.
Has anyone seen that?
It's a lovely video about how he's basically making a goose. So the kids love him. They love being online with him. And we really, many of us have a personal preference for the live over the mediated, and fine. But that personal preference shouldn't get in the way of us being inventive and creative and finding our own ways of how do we build a group presence? How do we get to know each other? What is the first 10-hour drama class online that's going to give me my connectivity with the audience? And I say that we're just tomorrow we're launching a course on classical Indonesian music.
No,
right?
Indian. Right?
What did I say?
Indonesian.
Classical Hindustani music, right? Going since the 7th century. Their mode of engagement is you sit and you observe and you learn these skills. And the idea of, and this in part, about the embodiment, we all have different thresholds around embodiment. And just because, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Katie, but just because my preference is this, it doesn't mean that it can't be done elsewhere. It probably can't be done the same way, but how do we turn our creative energies to doing that better, and from there reverberating the whole of the online learning design world? Because that's absolutely what we need to do. It's god awfully depressing.
to be honest, I was keen to share an excerpt of the Indian classical music with you. And Brad said, no, we don't have time. But it's an interesting approach because there are some video lessons in the media queue, and then there are hours worth of vocal exercises. So each exercise is 10 minutes long, and you practice the scales, and you practice and sing along or play your instrument. And there are, as I say, hours worth of these vocal exercises that develop the muscularity for the performer. And that works very well online for that particular form of music and that style of teaching.
And Amanda and I, coming from interactivists and constructivists, we're kind of first going, oh, do we really want to do this? Really, is this pedagogically, is this sound enough? And then we thought, well, it's been going since the 7th century.
It's engrossing.
We should just trust it. Like, it's been going for 14 centuries. Okay, of course. So we all have different, we all have our own different preferences as well. And we need to, watch those in terms of working out what's an appropriate response. I'm wondering too, just because we're at short time.
We've got about 4 minutes left.
I know. So Michael, what I was just going to say is we'd be perfectly happy if people want to, register or indicate this, we'd be perfectly happy to run a Kadenze webinar in this time zone, because there are folks from Asian countries as well. We'd be happy to do a follow-up where it could all just be Q&A and sharing of various perspectives. So I just put that on the table.
Great. Julie, do you want to unmute and ask your question as the last question?
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Brad and Amanda. I guess what I'm interested in is student agency, and it seems like in a lot of online learning, there's not a lot of opportunities for students to exercise agency and take control of their own pathway through the learning. So I'm wondering, have you kind of started looking at or already working in some persistent synchronous learning opportunities? So a space where students can come together anytime to engage together to co-create. So a co-creative, synchronous, persistent space.
It's a lovely idea. I like that. And look, there's a couple of ways that we might respond. I'll just mention one point. We have one course at the moment that's in development where the instructor, who is from higher ed, teaching psychology, is most interested in handing over the teaching to the students. So it's entirely student-centered and about group collaboration and learning through projects, digital projects. So I just mentioned that one where the instructor is almost not present. It's the delivery is handed over to students using student work. But Brad, you might like to pick up on the point about Kadenze engaging with developing a kind of community of practice.
I mean, Julia, am I right in thinking you're one of the things you're wanting is, or suggesting is, you'll have an online classroom that's always open and people can come and go in it and leave it?
Yes. And not just a classroom that's open, but gallery space. So there's a technology called I can't remember what it's called, but you can actually, students can post stuff up on the walls and they can actually wander around in like a virtual world and examine the gallery together, actually talking. And I think that's I think posts are great, but I'm just wondering if that's a kind of technology you're thinking about adding into your into Kadenze, because I think that kind of, it's the persistence, but it's also having the artifacts that you've got and actually being able to wander around and look at them while you're interacting. So that and it's open all the time. So you can say, hey, let's meet in the gallery.
So it's much more informal learning kind of space than
and it would lend itself perfectly to project-based work, for instance, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And that. I mean, it reminds me of the long conversations we're having about the 5th International Teaching Artists Conference, where that's exactly what we wanted to have, but the provider was beyond them technically. We've talked about spaces like that in Kadenze. We've also talked about how we will use augmented reality to do that, and we've got people connected with us who want to do that. To do it as a feature of a platform, we worked out is probably an investment of around $500,000. And so while it's a dream, it's a dream that's a long way off for us. Because it won't come as any surprise to people, because we only do creative arts and design. We're not a rich company with making lots of money. We don't do the $20,000 introduction to business course, for instance. So, and it was also built, all of those university courses we've shared with you today, you can do them and even be marked as a member, a member or a premium member of Kadenze for $20 a month. So that's the affordability question coming in. But you are right, Julie. I think what we need are partners who are going to, and research partners who are going to work with us and have the hefty pockets and resources to make this happen. And sadly, it seems to be driven, as the internet has been, mainly by Hollywood and the porn industry. So we need to find a new space. But,
I was just about to say we're ending that ending as we always do on the question of money, but we managed to get the porn industry in there. So thanks, Brad.
No trouble. So they say. I have no idea, but so they say.
Yeah, I'm also.
The question back to Julie is, Julie, let's talk more about this and see what's possible, how we define and shape it. Because unless we give it shape, that as an idea may get off the ground, but it'll be for some engineering lab, so and that may be good. We can adapt that maybe.
I'd love to see. I'd love to see that particular example, Julie. If you remember what it's called, do share with us.
Oh, it's called IC. I've remembered it. Small I, capital S, double E. Michael and I were involved in putting an ARC grant together for that, with a few others like Kelly Freebody, but Australian Research Council didn't think it was worth funding. So, co-creation for young people in persistent synchronous spaces. So I don't know how they didn't think that was useful in COVID times, but it's interesting. Yeah. Sure. Oh yeah, so David's just put the link up.
Great, thanks David. Thanks, mate. Good to see you again, Dave.
We might draw the session to a close.
Yeah.
I want to mention a couple of things. It's worth looking at the YouTube site to have a look at CNT session, because they spoke a lot about the kinds of issues that we're talking about today, and their Prospero platform is quite useful. People have found it quite useful, and it links in very well with archives in the same way that I imagine a lot of Kadenze stuff does as well. Also wanted to mention that we've got another session coming up with Sandra Gattenhoff, looking at arts wellbeing and the interaction between arts and wellbeing, and that's going to be in our e-news. So we'd love to have you along to that. I know Sandra's online, so great to see Sandra today, but you'll get a chance to see her in all her glory in a few weeks' time. And please, you can register through the e-news or whichever way you like. But thanks so much to Brad. Thanks to Amanda. Thanks for such an engaging way to kind of think about this work, and feel free to get in contact with Amanda or Brad if you want to pursue that discussion a bit further.
I've just put up a slide that has our email addresses, so do feel free to get in touch.
We'd love that.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great evening. See you later.
Thanks a lot, all. Nice to meet you all.
everyone.
Bye-bye now. Bye.